My beloved child, before you move a single step further into the noise of your day, I need you to stop here. Not because something is about to go wrong, not because I am angry, but because what I am carrying into this moment is something I have been waiting to place into your hands for longer than you realize, and I will not let another day pass with you walking beneath its weight without knowing what I see when I look at you. So pause. Let your shoulders drop. Let the list of everything you still need to do grow quiet for just a moment. You do not have to earn this. You only have to receive it. I know you have been tired in a way that is hard to explain. Not just physically tired, though that is real too, but tired in the deeper place, the place where hope lives, or where it used to live before the days of waiting wore it thin. I know the specific shape of the exhaustion you are carrying right now, because I have been watching you carry it for a long time. I know what it feels like on the inside of you when you wake up in the morning, and the first thing that arrives before you are even fully conscious is the awareness that the thing you most need has still not come. I know the way you hold yourself together in front of other people, the way you answer that you are fine in a tone that is almost convincing. I know the specific moment in the day when the performance of being okay becomes the heaviest labor of all. I know the prayers you stopped praying, not the prayers you gave up on all at once in anger, in a single dramatic surrender. That is not how it happened. It happened slowly, the way a fire does not go out with one gust of wind but fades ember by ember, each disappointment cooling something slightly, each unanswered season turning down the heat a little further, until one day you realize you are no longer asking for the thing you wanted most, and you cannot name exactly when you stopped. You only know that somewhere along the way, asking started to feel like a kind of self-harm, like pressing on something bruised, and so you protected yourself the way every wounded person learns to protect themselves. You stopped reaching, you lowered the request, you wrapped the deepest longing in enough distance that if the answer did not come, the fall would be shorter. I saw that. I watched the prayers go quiet, and I did not look away. I want to tell you something about every single prayer you have ever placed before me, including the ones you whispered at 2 in the morning, when the only sound in the house was your own breathing and the thing you were carrying felt too large for your chest, including the ones you prayed on the floor, in your car before walking back into a situation that was slowly taking something from you. The ones you prayed not with polished words, but with the kind of inarticulate ache that has no good language, only pressure and need, and a reaching towards something you could not see. I heard every one of them, not in the vague sense of a God who hears everything in the way a sky receives sound, distant and indifferent. I heard them the way a father hears his child calling from the next room in the dark, directly, personally, with the full attention of someone for whom that voice is the most important sound in the world. And I want to dismantle right now, in this moment, the story your pain has been telling you about what my silence meant. My silence was never my absence. My silence was never my forgetting. My silence was the sound of me working at a depth that your eyes in that season could not reach. Think about what it means to sit in a waiting room while a surgeon operates. The patient hears nothing, feels nothing happening, lies still while the most important work of their healing is being done in a room they cannot enter. And then they wake, different from how they went under, in a condition they could not have arrived at without the very silence of the surgery. That is not an absence. That is a presence working at a level that required stillness on your part to be completed. There were seasons of your life where the deepest work I was doing required the silence you experienced, not because you were unworthy of an answer, not because your faith was insufficient, but because to give you the answer at the moment you asked, in the form you imagined, would have been like placing a seed into frozen soil. The seed was real, the harvest was real, but the ground was not yet ready, and only I could see that from where I was standing. You remember what you asked for, and I closed. The relationship you prayed would be restored, and I did not restore it. What you could not see from inside that prayer was what 3 more years inside it would have cost you. I saw the version of you that emerges from staying, and that version had forgotten the sound of its own voice, had learned to make itself smaller to fit a space it was never designed for. I did not close that door to punish you. I closed it because I had already seen the version of you that only becomes possible on the other side of it, and that version is the one I was building toward. You remember the provision that did not come when you needed it most. The deadline that arrived before the answer did. The calculation that did not work out. What you could not see was that the provision was traveling toward you through a route that was not yet assembled. I was arranging pieces you could not see, people who had not yet been moved into position, resources that had not yet been released, connections that required time to form. The provision was never not coming. It was coming through a road that was still being built, and to have dropped it into your hands before that road existed would have given you something that could not be sustained. You remember the pain that you begged me to stop and I let continue. That one is the hardest to hold. I know it is the hardest, but hear me, because this is the truth your soul most needs. There are rooms inside a person that only open under pressure, not because pressure is good in itself, but because those rooms have been locked for a very long time and gentle knocking does not reach them. The things that were unlocked in you during your most painful seasons, the depth you carry now that you did not carry before, the compassion that is in your hands now for other people in their own dark places, the inability to be satisfied with shallow comfort because you know what real need feels like from the inside. None of that was manufactured by an easy road. None of that was possible without what you walked through. And I need you to know that I was not absent from any of it. I was in every moment of it, working, completing what could not be completed any other way. Before I go further, I also want to speak to the one who is not merely weary from waiting, but is right now standing at the absolute edge of what they can hold. The one who has been so strong for so long that strong has become a cage. The one who will not let anyone see what is happening on the inside, because the performance of being okay has become so automatic that even you have forgotten it is a performance. I see you in the middle of that. I see the specific way you hold it together. I see the moments in a day when something small cracks the surface, and for a second the real weight shows, and then you pull it back, seal it over, keep moving. I want to say to you directly, you are allowed to set it down, not permanently, just long enough for me to show you that I was carrying it with you the entire time, and that you do not have to hold it alone even for one more hour. I also need you to understand something about who you have become through the long waiting, because the waiting was not only loss, it was formation. You know what it is to sit with someone in their unanswered silence without offering them easy comfort. You know what it is to say, I have been in this place too, and mean it in your whole body. That is not a skill. That is not something learned in comfortable seasons. It is something that can only be carried by a person who has actually been in the dark long enough to know its texture. The people whose lives you are going to touch, the ones I am sending you toward, some of them need that specific knowing. They need someone who will not flinch at their silence, who will not fill it with hollow reassurance, who will simply sit down beside them and be present without needing the darkness to be over yet. You became that person in the long seasons. You became that person in the very place you were asking me to take you out of, and you became harder to shake. The faith that has never been tested does not know what it is made of. But you have called my name when your voice was shaking, and you could not hear anything back. You have chosen trust when the evidence for trust was thin. You have stood in the middle of confusion and decided, even without certainty, that I was still here. In doing so, you built something in yourself that cannot be built any other way. Not bought. Not inherited, not transferred, only forged. And what was forged in you in those long, quiet, invisible seasons is what will carry you through what is coming, because what is coming is not small. Now I need to speak to you about this specific season, because what I am telling you today is not only a comfort about the past, it is a declaration about what is already in motion. There are prayers stored in heaven with your name attached to them that are being released right now, not someday. Not in the vague language of eventually. In this particular season of your life, in the weeks and months immediately ahead, things that were held are being set in motion. I say this not to create a feeling that fades when morning comes. I say it because your soul needs to know the posture to stand in before it happens. Because answered prayers arrive in ordinary clothing, and an unprepared soul walks right past them. The provision will not always arrive as a sudden windfall. Sometimes it arrives as a door that cracks open in a professional direction you had stopped watching. A person who appears with exactly the resource you needed at a moment that feels too precise to be accidental. You will feel it in the peace that accompanies it, that peace is the signature. I do not attach my peace to coincidence. The healing you ask for will not always arrive as a dramatic reversal. Sometimes it arrives first as a morning where the weight is measurably lighter without anything external having changed. A conversation that unlocks something that has been stuck for years. A night where sleep comes without the usual fighting for it. Do not dismiss these as small. They are the first visible edge of something I have been assembling underground for longer than you know. The connection you have been quietly aching for will not arrive wearing a sign that says I am the answer to your prayer. It will arrive in the form of a person whose presence simply resonates in a way that very few ever have, and you will recognize it not in your mind, but in the oldest part of you, the part that knows my handiwork when it appears. Pay attention to small beginnings. In this season, the evidence of my answering will often first appear as something that could be dismissed as coincidence by a soul that has not been sharpened by the long wait. You will feel it in the slight easing of something that has been constant, in the door that moves without forcing, in the conversation that opens a direction you had stopped watching, in the unexpected name that comes to mind, and then the message you almost did not send that opens something you had not expected. In the morning you wake up and realize you slept without the usual fighting. These are not small things. These are the first visible edges of something being assembled at a level I have been working at for longer than this season. Now I need to go somewhere deeper, because what I am about to say is not comfort. It is a decree, and I need you to receive it standing up. My child, you have been looking at yourself through the wrong lens for too long. The lens of the waiting, the lens of the silence, the lens of the version of you that measured its own worth by whether or not the answer had come. I am removing that lens right now, and I am replacing it with the lens I have been using since before you were born. And when you see yourself through that lens, what you see is not someone who has been overlooked. What you see is someone who has been prepared. Do you know what I saw in Joseph when he was in the pit? Not a young man who had been abandoned by his brothers. I saw a ruler. I saw someone who would one day hold the food supply of nations in his hands. I saw someone whose character had to be tested in the pit before it could be trusted with the palace. The pit was not the end of Joseph's story. The pit was the beginning of Joseph's authority. And every year in the pit, every year in Potiphar's house, every year in prison, was not time stolen from his calling. It was time given to his calling, because authority that has not been tested is not authority that can be trusted. You belong to that lineage. I need you to hear that. Not as a comfort, as a fact. Joseph is not just a story in a book. He is your spiritual ancestor. The same patterns I used to build him I am using to build you. The same refining fire, the same invisible preparation, the same gap between the words spoken over you and the visible evidence of it. A gap that looks from the inside like abandonment and looks from the outside like authority and formation. Do you know what I saw in Gideon when he was hiding in the winepress, threshing wheat in secret because he was afraid of the enemy? I saw a deliverer. I called him mighty warrior before he had won a single battle, before he had demonstrated a single courageous act, before he believed it himself. I called him according to what I had placed in him, not according to what he had yet become. And when I stripped his army down to 300 men and sent him against an army as thick as locusts, I did not make a mistake. I was not optimistic in an irresponsible way. I knew what I had built in him in the long seasons of hiding. I knew that what the hiding had done to him, the dependence on me it had forced, the inability to take credit for victory it had created, was exactly what the calling required. You are Gideon's heir. The season of hiding was not the season of your smallness. It was the season of your preparation. And what you have been forced to depend on me for through the years of the waiting is the very dependence that will make you unmistakable as mine when I send you out. Do you know what I saw in Peter when he denied me 3 times in a courtyard while the fire burned and the accusation came? I did not see a failure. I saw a man who loved so deeply that when the love met fear it shattered him. And I knew that a man who could be shattered by love gone wrong was a man in whom love went very deep. I did not give the keys of the kingdom to the disciple who had never fallen. I gave them to the one who had fallen and returned, who knew what it was to stand on the other side of his own worst moment and find that I was still there. That knowing is not available to those who have not fallen. It cannot be transferred by instruction. It lives only in the person who has actually been in the place of the fall and experienced the restoration that follows it. You belong to Peter's line. The falls you have taken, the moments you believed you had disqualified yourself from what I had promised, the times you turned away and then slowly, carefully turned back. Every one of those moments has been deposited as a kind of knowing that no amount of theological study can produce. You carry it in your body, in the way you speak to people who are still in the middle of their own fall, in the way you do not flinch at the story of someone who has gone to a place they are ashamed of, in the way you do not offer them a formula. You offer them your actual eyes, and your actual eyes carry Peter's line, Joseph, Gideon, Peter. These are not figures from a distant past. They are your spiritual family. You are grafted into the lineage of the ones I chose, not because they were without wound, but precisely because the wound did not make them leave. And now I speak to you with the same authority with which I spoke to every one of them. Stand up, not in the performance of confidence, in the quiet, settled acknowledgement of someone who has finally allowed themselves to receive what I have been trying to give them for a long time. You are not behind. I need you to stop living as though you are behind. The story that says everyone else is further along and you are the one who got lost is a story your pain wrote, and I am not in it. My story about you has no behind. It has a precise and appointed time, and that time is this season. You are not disqualified. Every wound you have collected, every season you have failed to live up to your own standards, every prayer you whispered with shaking hands and then stopped whispering. None of it has removed your name from what I have written over you. The names I write are not written in pencil. They do not fade when the recipient stumbles. They were written before you made a single choice, and they will stand after every choice you have made and still make. You are not too late. The enemy of your soul has spent a great deal of energy trying to convince you that you missed the window, that the calling was for a younger version of you, that the accumulated weight of the years of waiting somehow disqualifies you from the very thing the waiting was building you toward. I am ending that argument right now. Moses was 80 years old when I sent him to Pharaoh. 80 years old, 40 of which he spent in the wilderness he thought was his punishment. That wilderness was his preparation. Every year of it, every single year of tending flocks in obscurity, was a year of forming the shepherd who would lead 1 million people through a desert. You have not wasted time. You have been in the wilderness of preparation, and the burning bush is closer than you think. This is the decree I place upon you in this hour. Every limitation the long season built into how you see yourself, I am dismantling. Every ceiling you placed over your own expectation because hoping high and falling had become too costly, I am removing. Every small, careful, protected way of living that the years of unanswered waiting trained you into, I am interrupting. I do not do this to be disruptive. I do it because you cannot enter what I have prepared for you while still crouching beneath a ceiling I never built. Stand at full height, speak at full volume, ask at full width, not because you are worthy in yourself, but because the one who sends you is, and what he places in your hands is only as large as the hands you open to receive it. There are people watching you right now who need you to be exactly who I have been making you. Not the polished version of you, not the version that has it together and can speak from a place of never having been broken. The version that walked through the long silence and kept walking. The version that folded the prayers away and then, somehow, picked them back up. The version that carried the Gideon fear and the Joseph pit and the Peter fall and still came back to a place where it could say, I do not fully understand you, but I trust you. That person is the one the broken people in your world need to encounter. Not a teacher. Not an example of a life that worked out smoothly. A witness. A person who carries in their actual body the proof that the long silence is not the last word. That is your assignment. Not a role you were handed because you were the most qualified candidate in a conventional sense. A calling you were built for by the very path you walked. Now let me close by placing something into the center of you that I need to still be there long after the feeling of these words has passed. You are not forgotten. That is not sentiment. It is the most factual sentence I can speak over your life. The prayers you folded away and stopped speaking aloud are not floating in empty space, unheard and uncatalogued. They are held every word, every breath, every night when the only prayer was silence and need, and the barely formed hope that someone was listening. I held all of it, and I hold it still. The silence was not the last chapter. It was where the most important chapters were being written. And now you are standing at the place where the pages turn. The place where what was built in the long quiet begins to become visible. Not all at once, but steadily, unmistakably, in the particular way that I have always brought things, through the ordinary moments, through the slightly open door, through the person who appears carrying exactly what was needed, through the morning that is different from the morning before it in a way that nothing external explains. Lift your eyes, my child, not in demand, not in the exhausted grasping of someone who has waited too long, but in the particular kind of faith that belongs only to a person who has been through what you have been through, and has not stopped looking. That faith is rare, and I treasure it in you. The silence is not over because it failed. It is over because it is finished, because what it was building is built. And the season of the building, which felt from the inside like waiting and loss and quietness, has become the foundation of something I am now ready to reveal. You will see it, not in the distance. Close, I have your name, I have your prayers, I have every page of the season you lived in the quiet, and I am about to use all of it. Thank you for listening to this message. Know that you are not just a viewer, you are someone chosen to live in the presence of God's Word every single day. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any sacred message. Amen.